This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News, and today I will be interviewing Sir Paul Beresford, the MP for Mole Valley, and I will be asking him about local planning issues, especially Wisley, about a question he raised in the House of Commons last week about the impact on Libya from the situation in Iran and his personal interest there, about Brexit, of course, and finally about his experiences as an MP and a minister. So Paul, thank you very much for letting us interview you today. The first question I have for you is about the Wisley development. Now, Wisley, the area in question, is within your constituency, but of course it's also within Guildford Borough. So what kind of complication does that present for you?
I, with the local people, was very much opposed to the plan that, at its draft stage, for both Wisley and for the Greenbelt villages in my constituency. My constituency takes the eastern wards of Guildford Council. We fought those tooth and nail, and I was shocked when it was put through in an abrupt manner after the election was called, before the election was held.
When the local plan was adopted?
That's when the local plan was adopted.
A week before the election?
And I've asked the council to do one of two things. They either review it, and they have to review it within 5 years, but they can review it right now if they wish, or they obliterate the local plan and start again. Mm-hmm. What will be interesting is that I've got a reply to the first letter, which was not encouraging. I've not had a reply to my second letter, but the judicial reviews could concentrate the minds of the council, and if they lose them, they may be in the position of doing one or both of what I asked.
Now, some of the councillors say if they had to start again with the local plan, it would allow developers to come in now and, in the absence of an up-to-date local plan, develop willy-nilly. Do you agree with that threat?
No, it's not quite as drastic as that, but it does allows them a chink through the armour. Therefore, I've asked for the review, and the review to start now, and for the review to respect the Greenbelt. If you look at the results of the local elections, the local people want respect to the Greenbelt.
But isn't the whole issue about Wisley a symptom of a flawed planning policy at government level?
No. I used to run Wandsworth Council, and it is possible to use development techniques and so forth to provide the housing without eating into the Greenbelt. And one of the reasons people like to live in places like that end, my end of Guildford and Mole Valley, is because of the countryside and the beauty. Right.
But do you think that, what are the flaws you see in the actual proposal for a Wisley development anyway?
I think it's Greenbelt, and I think it should be preserved as Greenbelt, and I think that the villages adjacent and close on my side of Guildford, which were in the Greenbelt, should be reinstalled into the Greenbelt to protect it. It's possible to bring the housing numbers up in the centre of Guildford using enlightened development with enlightened buildings there to provide a combination of density and height.
Let's get on to that in a little while, if you don't mind. But I just want to concentrate on Wisley itself at the moment. So presumably there's the fact that it's in your constituency, your parliamentary constituency, but in Guildford Borough Council's area, means that there is some conflict, perhaps, in interests here, because Anne Milton, as the Guildford MP, is probably one of the reasons she may be supportive of it is it won't impact on the voting when it comes to an election here. And of course, on your side, people who are dissatisfied with the Wisley development might be less likely to support you as a Conservative candidate. Is that one of the factors?
I've always been in favour of keeping the Greenbelt, and one of the things I learnt when I was in local government is it's possible to actually build iconic, sometimes, buildings to provide the accommodation without taking and tackling the Greenbelt. Perhaps it's partly because, as you can tell from my accent, I come from a pretty beautiful country in the world where the respect for the green environment is enormous, and I've inherited it.
Right, and do you think that the current concerns about climate change are another factor in our planning decisions?
They should be a factor, and we've got to take that into account. When I was a government minister, I spent quite a bit of time trying to improve the way in which we preserved heat, insulated, and the way in which we built buildings, which would have a knock-on effect positively to the environment issue.
Now, you mentioned that in your view it would be possible to develop more housing, presumably you meant in the town centre, so that we could preserve the green belt. That's what you think?
In and around.
Yes.
And again, I go back to some of the buildings that I helped as the council leader in central London. They're too high for Guildford, but it's possible to have them less height in the right areas, particularly as you go down into valleys, etc. And it's also possible to change the nature of the land in which you're building. So there's one area I can think of near the centre of town in Guildford. It's a flood area, but that could be overcome with moats, and the developers are quite happy to get in and provide that infrastructure so that they can then build there. Not too high, not too dense, but much better than trying to put buildings in the Greenbelt, be it Wisley or be it my villages.
Okay, this area, is it Walnut Tree Close or further out from the town?
There are a lot of areas there that I've looked at, but it isn't my constituency, so I'm treading very carefully.
Okay. Now, there is already one high-rise development that's been given planning permission, and that's at the station. What is your view on that development?
I think it could have been better designed and be more iconic. If you look at some of the buildings that are built up along the Thames in Wandsworth and now in Lambeth, they are iconic. You mightn't like them, but they are iconic, some of them. And if you give the developer the requirement to put something that is attractive, eye-catching, iconic, etc., they will do that because they need the land and they need to do the building.
Right. But in your view, is high-rise an inevitable part of such a recasting of the local plan, or would it be possible still to meet the housing requirement and keep a cap on the height of buildings in the town centre?
Yes, as I've said, the ones in central London, etc., are far too high. You can't have a 50-storey building in the middle of Guildford. It would be ludicrous. But you can certainly go much higher, and I'm having the same argument with my neighbouring Mole Valley Council. I want them not to go into the green belt, but to develop denser and higher. Higher doesn't mean high.
So what's too high for Guildford?
Depends on the circumstances. If you're building down in the valley, you can go higher. If you're on the top of the hill, you'll tend to be lower, unless you wanted to put an iconic building in that says, this is Guildford.
But wouldn't actually doing that hide the natural topography of the town?
Depends on where it is.
Okay.
And the place. It's very stupid to set rules because circumstances change them.
Now, do you think that the current planning policy is going to be sustainable politically, in as much as a lot of Guildford voters at the last borough council election seem to be turned off by the local plan? And the local plan has been adopted under the previous Conservative administration here in Guildford, and of course under a Conservative government. Don't you think it's going to cost you in elections?
I opposed the plan and I fought it tooth and nail, and the candidates that were standing in my Mole Valley section of Guildford also opposed the plan, and it's well known that I was opposed to that plan tooth and nail. So the local people feel roughshod, ridden over roughshod, so do I. I don't like it. That's why I've asked for it to be withdrawn or reviewed, and to look again at the Greenbelt aspects of it in particular.
So it's no surprise to you that the Guildford Conservatives are at an all-time low in Guildford Borough Council in number of seats?
I don't know why they didn't see it coming.
Right, okay. But you don't think it's any fault of the national planning policy?
No, he's followed the national planning policy, but it's broad enough for you to have huge shifts and variations within it. And I think And I think many of the elected councillors think that the Greenbelt ravaging was wrong, but that there is plenty of opportunity for enlightened thinking and enlightened buildings in the town and around the town.
Now, last week in the House of Commons, moving away completely from the local scene, there was a ministerial statement on the situation in Iran, and you raised a question about the impact, the possible impact, even on Libya. Why did you do that?
I've got an interest, and it's a declared interest, in a place called Sirte, which was Gaddafi's hometown. And when Gaddafi was there, it was blown to bits by the RAF and the United States Air Force. A small firm has been set up, of which I'm on the board, and we're looking to rebuild Sirte. We're looking to rent a large portion of the land, the whole land surrounding Sirte, and it will be an opportunity to build a Hong Kong, in effect, rented to us with British companies and so forth in there, and we'll be working in conjunction with the Libyan government to develop this. We're on the edge of signing an agreement. What bothers me is that there is, as everybody knows, conflict within Libya between the legitimate government and General Haftar, and I am bothered that because it's a turmoil on the edges of where we're looking, that the Iranians may well get in to continue the turmoil.
So you said you've got a declared personal interest in this situation.
That's right.
But do you feel there's also a national interest then?
Oh, definitely there's a national interest. I've talked it through with the Prime Minister and with the previous Prime Minister, and it's an opportunity to do something really positive. If we can get it in there, it'll be an intellectual base, it'll be an engineering base, it'll be a new city, and it'll open the doors going down through to the rest of Africa, Nigeria, for example, even down as far as South Africa. It's a big, big, useful scheme.
Right. And now coming back to the UK, and trying not to walk out at this point, but I'm going to raise Brexit. You have been criticised by some of your constituents for voting for Remain, but now supporting the government. What would you say to them if they were here?
It's called democracy. We had a referendum. I voted to Remain. I lost. We've got a diktat, as far as I'm concerned, a diktat from that referendum to go through with Brexit. It was a simple question: do we stay in or do we get out? And the answer was, from the public, was out.
So, but your constituency voted to Remain?
It's counted on a constituency basis for convenience, but in fact that's absolutely irrelevant. What is relevant is the fact that the nation, the whole nation, voted to go out.
So you feel that the group of 21 who decided to defy the Conservative whip were wrong in that decision?
I don't understand why some of them did, and I think some of them are regretting it and a little surprised. And I'm hoping that when Boris comes forward with this new deal, there will be a shift and it'll go through. And it could have some considerable support from many of the Labour Party that I've talked to, who actually will vote for it.
Right. Now, Sir Paul, you're from New Zealand and you've come to UK and you live here and you've got involved in politics. And you've been a minister. What is how would you sum up your experience as an MP and a minister?
It's been absolutely fascinating. I came off a very large farm near where they filmed Lord of the Rings, where we had 1,000 head of cattle, 1,000 head of sheep, 1,000 head of deer, and after lambing we had 50,000 sheep. There were 2 of us there, and then suddenly to arrive in East London, which I did at the early 70s, and find the country in a dire state. I complained about it. My neighbour said, if you can't just complain, you've got to do something about it. So we moved to Wandsworth. A whole group of us got together and we decided to campaign against the local council to turn it into a Conservative council. We did, and we turned that Conservative council round. It's now known as one of the best councils in the country, lowest tax, best services. And then I moved on into the House of Commons. John Major got me to be a minister very quickly. That was fascinating because I was able to apply it.
In which area was that?
I was in the local government and the environment. We made some dramatic changes, etc. Unfortunately, though we set the plans in plane and train, etc., we didn't complete them because we lost the election. Interestingly, the Labour Party in government took most of those and ran with them, which is why there are places like Sheffield and Liverpool and so on and so forth that are booming as well as they are. Manchester is another classic example. I helped initiate what's happened in Manchester. But then when I came on the back benches, I suddenly realised it was a new lease of life. It was possible for me to pick up strategic things of particular interest. I spent a day with the paedophile unit at Scotland Yard. I came out of there shattered. I couldn't believe what I saw and heard. So I went back and sat down with my researcher and then with my second researcher. We went through the changes in the law that they would like, and I put them on the shelf. When the opportunity came, we would bring them in. I've put about 11 changes in, and the effect on catching, prosecuting and putting paedophiles, people that do bad things to children, away has greatly increased. It's great when you have a senior police officer that rings you out of the blue and says, thank you. He was going away for 3 years, but he's now got 9, thanks to you. When you realise that they can check on them the way they weren't able to, so that if they walk in and they've got a single man with a computer full of porn and all the rest of it, you realise he's still doing it. Mm-hmm. But they've then gone on to other things, and one of the more interesting things I'm working on at the moment is prions. Prions, the mad cow disease, variant CJD. Mm-hmm. We're working on research on that. There's discussion today about compensating. If Brexit happens, there will still be a link between particularly Germany and this country, where we're leading on it. But the upshot of all that is going to be possibly a means of stopping Alzheimer's by getting the protons that cause the Alzheimer's linked in such a way that the body says, get rid of them, because at the moment the body doesn't recognise it because it's part of the body. Mm-hmm. I've got more things I want to do on child protection. The list is enormous.
So you find that there's such a wide spectrum of interest that it's keeping you fascinated by the sound of it?
Absolutely fascinated. And there are ways in which you can get the legislation through. What's unfortunate for me was the BBC, one of their journalists saw this, did a big article on it, which of course has made it obvious, so other people are doing it, and MPs and others have come and asked me to help to put their things through. But it is possible, and I've got a number of different changes and things I've got on the line at the moment.
Now, I've not been to New Zealand, I've been to Australia, but by all accounts it's a very beautiful country. So do you regret coming here, and are you planning to return there?
I go back for holidays, and after you've been there for some considerable time, it's beautiful. The weather in many of the areas I was in is beautiful. The beaches are fantastic, but it's empty. Okay.
Well, I think on that note, I'll say thank you very much, Sir Paul, and good luck with your parliamentary work.
Thank you.